The treatment center was a place of quiet desperation where healers moved with urgent efficiency around the high matriarch's bed, while Jinho sat in a waiting area with Tasani asleep against his shoulder. Hours had passed since Celine collapsed, and the Council of Elders had debated fiercely about what to do with the human who had invaded their sacred world. But no decision had been reached because everyone was too focused on their dying leader. Cathara approached and sat down beside him. The healers say she is stable for now, but the decay is accelerating. They estimate she has days rather than months, Jinho felt. Tazani stirred in her sleep and lowered his voice. Is there truly nothing that can be done? We have tried everything available to us. Every treatment known to Valari medicine. Every technique borrowed from our allies in the compact. What about human medicine? Kedar looked at him with surprise. Human medicine is primitive compared to ours. No offense intended. None taken. But sometimes primitive is not the same as useless. He thought about the medical advances Earth had made in the centuries since the global wars. Advances born from necessity and desperation rather than elegant science. After the wars that nearly destroyed our planet, humans developed new techniques for treating neural damage because so many survivors had injuries to their brains from the weapons used. We became very good at repairing things that other species might have considered beyond saving. Cathra's eyes widened. You think human doctors could help the High Matriarch? I do not know. But it might be worth asking. She stood abruptly. Wait here. Jinho waited while Kethra hurried away. And eventually, Tazani woke up with confusion in her silver eyes. Where are we? Where is Mother? She is resting, little one. The healers are taking care of her. I felt her mind flickering during my sleep, like a candle in the wind. She is getting weaker. Jinho hugged her gently. The healers are doing everything they can. And Kethra is looking into something that might help. What kind of something? Human medicine. It is different from what your people use. It might be able to do things your healers cannot. Tazani looked at him with a hope so fragile it made his heart ache. Really? Maybe. I am not making any promises, because I do not want to raise your hopes and then disappoint you. But there is a chance. They sat together in silence until Kethra returned with the High Chancellor and several other council members. All of them looking at Jinho with expressions that range from skeptical to grudgingly curious. The diplomat tells us you believe human medical techniques might help the High Matriarch. Chancellor Therion said, I believe it is worth exploring. Your methods have failed, and mine might succeed, or they might fail too. But at least they would be different. And what would humanity want in return for this help? Jinho shook his head. I cannot speak for all of humanity, Chancellor. I am just one man. But I can tell you that many humans would help simply because it is the right thing to do. The right thing to do. Therion repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language. And you expect us to believe that your people would offer aid without demanding concessions or political advantages. Some would demand those things, but others would not. You will have to decide which kind of humans you want to work with. The council members exchanged glances, and finally, Therion sighed. Contact the human embassy on Kepler Station. Tell them we are willing to discuss medical cooperation on an emergency basis. The next few days were a blur of activity that Jinho watched from the sidelines as human and Valari doctors met for the first time in history to share knowledge and develop treatment options. The human medical team that arrived was led by a woman named Dr. Kim Soyan, who specialized in neural regeneration. And she spent hours examining the High Matriarch's condition and comparing notes with the Valari healers. It is similar to a condition we have seen on Earth. She told the council during a briefing that Jinho was allowed to attend because Tazani refused to go anywhere without him. The neural pathways are deteriorating in a pattern that our treatments are designed to address. You can cure her. Tazani asked with desperate hope. Dr. Kim chose her words carefully. I cannot promise a cure, but I can promise that we will try everything we have. The combination of Valari telepathic medicine and human regeneration techniques might be able to slow or even reverse the decay. The treatment began the next day, and Jinho held Tizani's hand while they watched through a window as her mother lay surrounded by doctors from two worlds. Working together for the first time, days passed and turned into weeks. And slowly the High Matriarch began to improve. Her glow grew brighter, and her mind grew clearer. And the healers announced with cautious optimism that the treatment was working better than anyone had expected when Celine was finally strong enough to receive visitors. Tizani ran to her bed and climbed into her arms, just as she had done before, but this time there was no fear of goodbye. Only joy at reunion. Jinho stood in the doorway watching mother and daughter embrace, and he felt a peace settle over him that he had not known in many years. Celine looked up at him with gratitude shining in her silver eyes. You saved my life, human, not just by bringing my daughter home, but by opening a door between our peoples that has been closed for too long. I just suggested an idea. The doctors did the real work. You did more than suggest. You showed us that humanity is not what we believed it to be, or at least not entirely what we believed. She reached out her hand toward him. The Valari Empire formally endorses humanity's full membership in the Galactic Compact. We will no longer oppose your people's integration into our alliance. The announcement sent shockwaves through the galaxy. And suddenly Jinho found himself famous in a way he had never wanted or expected. Politicians and diplomats wanted to meet him. News organizations wanted to interview him. And various governments offered him positions and titles and rewards that would have made him wealthy beyond imagination. He refused them all. The only thing he accepted was permission to visit Tizani whenever he wished. And he became a regular presence on Veloth Prime over the following months, teaching the little girl more breathing exercises and human games while she showed him the maze wonders of her world. Cathara watched their friendship grow and found herself questioning everything she had believed about humans. I once told my subordinates that humans were the greatest threat to the galaxy, she said to Jinho one evening as they sat on a balcony overlooking a crystal forest. I believed your species was violent and selfish and would eventually destroy everything good in the universe. What do you believe now? She considered the question. I believe you might be the galaxy's greatest hope, not because of your technology or your military strength, but because of your strange capacity to care for those who are not your own, your willingness to help without expectation of reward, your ability to see a scared child and choose compassion over indifference. That is not uniquely human. No, but you seem to have it in abundance. Tizani came running onto the balcony with excitement glowing across her skin. Jinho, come see. The crystal forest is singing because the wind changed direction. You have to hear it. He stood and let her grab his hand and pull him toward the railing. And as he listened to the strange and beautiful music of the alien trees, he felt something he had not felt. Since his mother died, he felt like he belonged. His life had changed forever on that day. He found a lost little girl in a dark corridor, changed in ways he could never have predicted or imagined. He had come to Veloth Prime expecting to deliver a child and leave. But instead he had found a new family, a new purpose, and a new understanding of what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of wonders. Tizani tugged on his arm and grinned up at him with pure joy. Are you happy? Jinho. He smiled down at her. Yes, little one. I am happy, and for the first time in a very long time, it was true. The shuttle descended through clouds that glowed with soft pink and golden light, and Jinho pressed his face against the viewport to see the world below. A world no human had ever visited in all the centuries. Since first contact between their species Velth Prime was beautiful beyond anything he had imagined, with vast forests of crystalline trees that caught the sunlight and scattered it into rainbows across the landscape, and cities that floated among the clouds on platforms of gleaming silver metal, connected by bridges that looked like strands of spun glass. Tasani stood beside him with her hand in his, and despite her worry about her mother, she could not help but smile at seeing her home. "That is the Crystal Sea," she said, pointing to a massive expanse of shimmering blue. "And there is the Mountain of First Songs, where my ancestors learned to hear the thoughts of others. It is incredible." "You really think so?" "I have never seen anything so beautiful in my entire life." Tasani's glow shifted to a pleased gold for just a moment before worry clouded her features again. "I hope Mother is still awake when we arrive. I need to tell her I am sorry for running away. She will not be angry with you, little one. She will just be happy to see you safe." The shuttle landed on a platform near the largest floating city, and as the doors opened, Jinho was hit by air that smelled like flowers and honey and something else he could not name. Something that made his mind feel clearer and his heart feel lighter. Then he saw the crowd waiting for them, and his good feelings disappeared. Dozens of Velari stood in formation around the landing pad, their faces hard with suspicion and their bioluminescent skin flickering with colors that Jinho had learned meant hostility. And behind them stood a group of robed figures who were clearly important officials based on the elaborate designs on their clothing. "Stay close to me," Kethra murmured as she led them down the ramp. "And do not speak unless spoken to directly." Tasani clung to Jinho's hand, and he could feel her trembling as the crowd's emotions pressed against her developing telepathic senses. All that anger and fear and distrust aimed at the human who dared to set foot on their sacred world. A tall Velari with silver robes and a stern expression stepped forward. "I am High Chancellor Therian Vess, and I speak for the Council of Elders in this matter. You will release the child immediately and submit yourself for questioning." Jinho opened his mouth to respond, but Tasani spoke first. "No. The kind man stays with me. He helped me when I was lost and scared, and he has been good to me." The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. "Child, you do not understand what this creature is. Humans are dangerous and deceptive. He has surely manipulated you for his own purposes." "That is not true." Tasani's voice grew louder, and her skin flashed red with anger. "Jinho is kind and gentle, and he taught me how to breathe when the big feelings got too much. He did not ask for anything in return." The crowd murmured with disbelief, and the Chancellor looked at Kethra with accusation in his eyes. "Diplomat Saloon, explain how you allowed this situation to develop." Kethra straightened her spine and met his gaze without flinching. The child refused to be separated from the human, and forcing the issue would have caused significant telepathic disturbance. "I made the practical decision to allow him to accompany us, a practical decision that has brought a human to Velith Prime for the first time in history. Do you understand the implications of this? I understand that a frightened child needed comfort, and this man provided it, whatever his species may be." The Chancellor's face darkened with rage, but before he could respond, another voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Enough." Everyone turned to see a procession emerging from the nearest building, with healers in white robes surrounding a floating medical platform on which lay a frail Velari woman whose glow was so dim it barely illuminated her features. "Mother!" Tasani cried out and pulled free of Jinho's hand, running across the platform toward the medical bed, with tears streaming down her face. High Matriarch Salim Tessara was dying. That much was clear from her hollow cheeks and clouded eyes. But when she saw her daughter running toward her, her face transformed with a joy so powerful that her glow brightened for just a moment. "My little star, you came back to me." Tasani climbed onto the platform and threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing apologies and declarations of love while the healers watched with tears in their own eyes. Jinho hung back, not wanting to intrude on this reunion. But then the High Matriarch looked past her daughter and fixed her silver eyes on him. "Come here." "Human." The crowd gasped, and the Chancellor stepped forward with objection on his lips. But Celine silenced him with a look that carried the full weight of her authority. Despite her weakened state, Jinho walked forward slowly, aware of every hostile gaze fixed on him, until he stood beside the medical platform, looking down at the woman he had heard so much about. "You are the one who found my daughter." "Yes." "I, Matriarch, and you traveled 3 days through space to bring her home to me." "Yes." Celine reached out with a trembling hand. "May I?" Jinho did not understand what she was asking until Kethera whispered from behind him, "She wishes to touch your mind. To see your true intentions. It will feel strange, but it will not harm you." He nodded and took the High Matriarch's hand, and immediately felt a presence brush against his thoughts like fingers trailing through water. He did not resist or try to hide anything, letting her see his memories of finding Tasani in the dark corridor, of sitting with her and offering food, of teaching her to breathe and telling her stories and promising to stay with her until she was home. San saw his memories of his own mother, of the grief that had nearly destroyed him as a child, of the loneliness that had followed him into adulthood. She saw that he had no agenda and no ulterior motive, that he was simply a man who had seen a scared child and chosen to help when she withdrew from his mind. There were tears on her face. In all my years of reading human minds during diplomatic functions, I have never encountered one like yours. Your people are supposed to be violent and selfish and consumed with ambition. But you are none of these things. I am just a cargo worker, High Matriarch. There is nothing special about me. That is where you are wrong." Celine looked at the council members who had gathered around the platform. "This man has shown my daughter more kindness in 3 days than many of our own people have shown her in her lifetime. He comforted her when she was afraid. He taught her to manage her gifts. And he did all of this expecting nothing in return." The Chancellor scowled. "One human does not represent his entire species. No. But perhaps this one human can show us that we have been wrong about his species." She turned back to Jinho with eyes that held both gratitude and curiosity. "Tell me, human, among your people, are there others like you?" Jinho thought carefully before answering. "Humans are complicated. High Matriarch, we can be cruel and selfish and destructive. Our history is full of wars and betrayals and terrible things done in the name of power." He paused. "But we can also love deeply and sacrifice willingly and protect fiercely those who cannot protect themselves. I am not unique. There are millions of humans who would have done exactly what I did if they had found Tasani in that corridor. Not all of them, though. No, not all of them, but enough." Celine smiled weakly, and her glow flickered. "Enough. Maybe all that matters." Then her eyes rolled back and the healers rushed forward as alarms began to sound from the medical equipment. "Her vitals are crashing," one of them shouted. "We need to get her to the treatment center immediately." Tasani screamed for her mother, and Jinho caught her as she nearly fell from the platform, holding her tight while the healers rushed Celine away and the council members argued about what to do. "It will be okay," he whispered to the crying child, hoping he was not lying. "Your mother is strong. She will fight." But even as he said the words, he wondered if strength alone would be enough to save her. Jinho felt his heart break at Tasani's words, and he pulled her closer, letting her cry against his shoulder while the stars drifted past the viewport in silence. "Tell me what you heard." "Little one," Tasani's voice came out in shaky fragments between sobs. "The healers were talking when they thought I was sleeping. They said Mother has a sickness in her mind that is eating her thoughts. They said there is no cure, and she will fade away before the winter moon rises on Velith Prime." Jinho did not know what to say because he could not promise that her mother would be okay when he did not even understand what was wrong with her. So he simply held the child and let her cry until her tears ran dry. I was so scared, Tasani continued. Everyone was sad and angry and pretending everything was fine, but I could feel their emotions. I could feel them lying. And I did not know what to do, so I ran. That must have been very hard for you. The feelings were too big. Jinho, they were crushing me, and I could not breathe. He remembered his grandmother's words from long ago. When grief had threatened to swallow him whole after losing his mother, sometimes when the feelings get too big, we need to make ourselves small and quiet until they pass. Like a boat waiting out a storm. How do you make yourself small and quiet? Jinho shifted so he could look at her face. I will teach you a trick that my grandmother taught me. It helps when everything feels overwhelming and you cannot think clearly. He placed her small hand on his chest. Feel my breathing. In and out, slow and steady. Now I want you to copy me. Breathe in for 4 counts. He inhaled deeply and counted in his head. Hold it for 4 counts. He waited. Now breathe out for 4 counts. He exhaled slowly. Tasani tried to follow along. Her first attempt shaky and uneven, but after a few minutes she began to find the rhythm, and her bioluminescent glow shifted from the harsh orange of distress to a softer purple. Good. That is very good. Now when the big feelings come, you can use this trick to make them smaller and more manageable. Will it make the sad go away? No. Little one, the sad will still be there because that is part of loving someone. But the trick will help you carry the sad without letting it crush you. Tasani nodded and practiced the breathing exercise a few more times. And Jinho watched her with a mix of affection and sorrow because no child should have to face the possible death of a Parankathara appeared in the doorway. And from her expression Jinho could tell she had been listening. You heard about the High Matriarch's condition. Jinho met her eyes without flinching. Tasani told me. A degenerative neural sickness with no cure. The diplomat entered the cabin and sat down across from them. Her usual coldness replaced by exhaustion that made her look older than she had seemed before. The condition is called Valanthi's decay. It attacks the telepathic centers of the brain and slowly erases the mind of the afflicted. The High Matriarch has perhaps 6 months before she loses the ability to recognize her own daughter. Tasani made a small sound of pain and Jinho wrapped his arm around her. Is there truly nothing that can be done? Our healers have tried everything. We have consulted with the Thren and the Culvery and even the mysterious architects of the Outer Rim. But no one has ever cured Valanthi's decay. It has killed queens and scholars and warriors throughout our history. I am sorry. Kethra looked at him with suspicion. Why would you be sorry? You do not know the High Matriarch, and your species has no reason to care about our suffering. I am sorry because Tasani is going to lose her mother. And because I know what that feels like. Something shifted in the diplomat's expression. You lost your mother when I was 8 years old. A sickness took her in the middle of winter, and I watched her fade away over 3 months. Unable to do anything but hold her hand and tell her I loved her. Kethra was silent for a long moment. I did not know humans formed such strong bonds with their offspring. We are not so different from your people in that way. We love our children and our parents and our families with everything we have. And when we lose them, the pain never truly goes away. Tasani looked up at Jinho with fresh tears in her eyes. You understand the big sad? Yes, little one. I understand it very well. She hugged him tightly, and he hugged her back. And across from them, Kethra watched with an expression that had lost all traces of hostility. The next 2 days passed slowly on the shuttle. And Jinho spent most of his time caring for Tasani, while the Valari guards observed from a distance. He taught her more breathing exercises and showed her how to play simple games with her hands and told her stories about Earth that made her laugh with delight. Stories about dogs and cats and the ocean and mountains covered in snowing. Returned Tasani told him about Velith Prime, about the crystal forests that sang when the Dias didn't end. Wind blew through them and the floating cities that drifted among the clouds and the great libraries, where her people stored the memories of every Valari who had ever lived. Mother took me to the memory palace once, Tazani said with a smile that was tinged with sadness. She showed me the memories of my grandmother and my great-grandmother and all the mothers before them. She said that when she dies, her memories will join theirs, and she will never truly be gone. Jinho stroked her hair. That is a beautiful tradition, but I do not want memories. I want my real mother. I want her to hold me and sing to me and teach me how to use my gifts properly. I know. Little one, I know. Kethra began spending more time in their cabin. At first under the pretense of monitoring Jinho, but gradually with genuine interest in the strange human who had given up his job and his routine to help a child who was not his own. Why did you really volunteer for this journey? She asked. One evening while Tazani slept, I told you already. I could not walk away from a scared child. But there must be more to it than that. No one acts without self-interest. Jinho considered the question carefully. When my mother died, I was alone for a long time. No one came to help me or comfort me or teach me how to survive the grief. I had to figure it out by myself, and it almost destroyed me. He looked at sleeping Tasani. When I saw her in that corridor, I saw myself. Lost and scared and needing someone to show her that she was not alone. I could not give that gift to myself as a child, but I could give it to her. Kethra was quiet for a long time. Among my people, we would call what you feel shiral. It is a word that means seeing yourself in another and choosing to ease their burden even at cost to yourself. We have a simpler word for it. We call it compassion. Compassion. Kethra repeated the word slowly. I've read about this human concept, but I always assumed it was exaggerated in your literature. It is real, and it exists in more humans than you might believe. The diplomat leaned back in her seat and looked at him with eyes that had finally lost their suspicion. Perhaps I have misjudged your species. Perhaps you have. They sat in comfortable silence until the shuttle's navigator announced that they were approaching Velith Prime. And Tasani woke up with a gasp as she sensed the presence of her homeworld through her developing telepathic abilities. We are here. Jinho, we are here. But before they could celebrate, another announcement came through the speakers. And Kethra's face went pale as she listened. The High Matriarch's condition has worsened dramatically. Medical teams are unsure if she will survive until our arrival. Tazani began to cry, and her emotions broadcast outward in a wave of anguish that made everyone on the shuttle wince with shared pain. Jinho held her and looked at Kethra with determination. In his eyes, tell them to go faster. Tell them we are coming. Tell them that Tazani needs to see her mother. Kethra nodded and rushed to the cockpit. Jinho looked down at the crying child in his arms. We will get you there in time. Little one, I promise. He hoped it was not a promise he would have to break. The Valari diplomat's eyes narrowed with rage as she stared at Jinho, and the security officers around her shifted nervously because everyone knew what happened when someone angered the Valari, especially when one of their children was involved. You dare to defy me, human. You dare to keep your hands on a child of the High Matriarch. Jinho kept his voice calm, even though his heart was pounding hard enough to hurt. I am not defying anyone. I am simply telling you what I see, and what I see is a scared little girl who does not want to be grabbed by strangers. Maybe if you approach her more gently, she will come to you. The diplomat, whose name was Cathara Saloon, according to the identification badge on her robes, took another step forward, and the little girl Tasani let out a cry of fear that echoed through the corridor like a bell ringing in an empty church. Her bioluminescent skin flashed bright red and orange, and suddenly Jinho felt a pressure in his head that made him wince, and the security officers around them grabbed their temples and stumbled backward with groans of pain. What is happening? one of the officers. Shouted Kethra held up her hand to stop her guards from advancing. The child is broadcasting her fear telepathically. Her abilities are still developing, and she cannot control them when she is this distressed. If we force her away from the human, she could cause serious damage to everyone nearby. Jinho looked down at Tizani and squeezed her hand gently. Hey, little one. It is okay. Nobody is going to hurt you. Can you try to calm down a little bit? Take some deep breaths with me. He breathed in slowly and then out, repeating the pattern that his grandmother had taught him many years ago when his anxiety would overwhelm him as a child. And to his amazement, Tizani began to copy him, her small chest rising and falling in rhythm with his own. The pressure in his head eased, and the security officer stopped. Groaning Kethra watched this with an expression that shifted from fury to confusion to something that might have been reluctant curiosity. How did you do that? How did you calm her? I just asked her nicely and showed her what to do. It is not complicated. The diplomat studied Jinho for a long moment, her silver eyes searching his face the same way Tizani had done earlier, and he wondered if she was reading his emotions, too, or simply trying to understand what kind of human would sit down next to a strange alien child and offer her food. The High Matriarch's vessel departed Kepler Station 2 hours ago due to an emergency on our homeworld. We were searching for Tizani to bring her to a shuttle that would reunite her with her mother. But it seems the child has other ideas. Jinho felt Tizani's grip tighten on his leg. Where is your homeworld? 3 days travel from here through compact space. And every hour we delay is an hour that the High Matriarch spends in anguish over her missing daughter. Then, let me come with you. The words left Jinho's mouth before he could think about them properly, and Kethra's eyes widened with shock that quickly turned to disdain. A human on a Valari diplomatic vessel traveling to Velith Prime. You must be joking. I am not joking. Look at her. She trusts me for some reason, and she will not let go. Do you want to spend 3 days with a terrified child, broadcasting fear into everyone's minds? Or do you want her to be calm and comfortable during the journey? Kethra opened her mouth to refuse, but Tizani spoke first, her damaged translator crackling as it converted her words. Please, the kind man, he makes the fear smaller. Please, let him stay. The diplomat closed her eyes and took a long breath, and Jinho could see the internal battle playing out across her elegant features as pride fought against practicality. This is highly irregular and possibly illegal under compact law. I do not care about irregular or legal. I care about getting this little girl back to her mother. Kethra's eyes snapped open, and she fixed Jinho with a stare that could have frozen water. Why? What do you gain from this? Humans always want something in return for their help. Jinho shrugged with his free shoulder. I do not want anything. I just saw a scared kid alone in a dark corridor, and I could not walk away. That is all. The diplomat stared at him as if he had just spoken in a language her translator could not process. That is all. You expect me to believe that you have no ulterior motive, no political agenda, no desire for reward or recognition. Lady, I sort cargo for a living. I do not know anything about politics, and I do not want recognition. I just want to make sure she gets home safe. Tizani tugged on Jinho's pants and looked up at him with those huge silver eyes. You will stay with me. You promise? He knelt down so he could look at her face to face. I promise, little one. I will stay with you until you are back with your mother. Her skin shifted to a warm golden color that Jinho had not seen before, and she smiled for the first time since he had found her. And that smile made everything that would come next worth whatever trouble it caused. Kethra watched this exchange, and something in her expression softened just slightly, though she quickly hid it behind her mask of diplomatic coldness. Very well. Human, you will accompany us to Velith Prime, but you will follow every rule I give you, and you will not speak to anyone unless I permit it. And if you cause any problems, I will personally throw you out of an airlock." "Understood." She turned to the security officers. "Return to your posts. The situation is under control. And send word to the shuttle that we will have an additional passenger." The officers exchanged uncertain glances, but obeyed, leaving Jinho alone with Kethera and the small group of Vailari guards who had accompanied her. "Come with me, human, and bring the child." Jinho followed her through the station corridors, with Tasani holding his hand tightly, and the Vailari guards fell into formation around them with expressions that made clear they would be happy for any excuse to hurt him. The shuttle was small but elegant, with curved walls that seemed to glow from within, and seats that adjusted automatically to fit the body of whoever sat in them. And Tasani pulled Jinho to a seat in the corner and climbed into his lap without asking. Permission. Kara sat across from them and watched with narrowed eyes. "You should know that no human has ever traveled to Velith Prime. Our homeworld is sacred to us, and outsiders are not welcome there. I am not looking to sightsee. I just want to deliver Tasani to her mother, and then go back to my job." "You speak as if it will be that simple. But nothing involving the Vailari is ever simple. Human." The shuttle lifted off, and Jinho felt his stomach drop as they left the artificial gravity of the station behind. And Tasani pressed closer to him as the stars became visible through the viewport, stroked her hair gently, and hummed a song his mother used to sing to him when he was small. And the little girl's glow settled into a peaceful blue as her eyes grew heavy with exhaustion. "She must have been so frightened," Jinho said quietly. "Lost on a strange station with no one to help her." Catherine's voice was cold, but something in her eyes flickered. She ran away from her guards during a market visit. "We searched for hours before receiving word that a human had been seen with a Vailari child in the lower districts." "Why did she run?" The diplomat hesitated, and for a moment her mask slipped to reveal genuine worry beneath. "That is not your concern." Jinho did not push, as he understood that some questions needed time before they could be answered. Tasani had fallen asleep against his chest, her small body warm and her glow dim and steady, and he leaned back in his seat and closed his own eyes. He did not know what he had gotten himself into, but he knew he had made the right choice. Later that night, when the shuttle had gone quiet and the guards had changed shifts, Tasani woke up with tears on her face and her translator finally working properly. "Jinho," she whispered. "I ran away because I heard them talking. They said my mother is going to die." Park Jinho rubbed his tired eyes and walked through the narrow corridors of Kepler Station, his body heavy with exhaustion after 16 hours of sorting cargo, manifests and tracking shipments across dozens of platforms. And all he wanted now was to reach his small quarters and sleep until his next shift began. The station hummed with life even at this late hour, with alien merchants closing their stalls and cleaning crews moving between levels, their conversations mixing into a blur of languages that Jinho had learned to ignore over his 5 years working here. And he took his usual shortcut through the lower market district, where fewer people traveled and the lights were dimmer. Kepler Station sat at the edge of human-controlled space, a massive structure that hosted traders and diplomats from across the Galactic Compact. And humanity had only recently gained admission to this ancient alliance of species, which meant that humans were still viewed with suspicion by many of the older races who remembered the wars Earth had fought before reaching the stars. Jinho did not care much about politics or galactic affairs, as he was simply a man who moved boxes from one place to another and made sure the numbers matched on his screens. And he had no family waiting for him back on Earth, and no grand ambitions beyond earning enough credits to live comfortably until he grew old. He turned a corner near the shipping containers and heard a small sound that made him stop walking. It was a whimper, soft and frightened, coming from behind a stack of metal crates that had been left for morning pickup. And Jinho knew he should probably ignore it because strange sounds in the lower districts often meant trouble. But something about this particular cry reminded him of a wounded animal or a scared child. He approached slowly and looked around the edge of the largest container. And what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. A small alien girl sat huddled against the wall with her thin arms wrapped around her knees and her large silver eyes filled with tears. And her skin glowed with a faint blue light that pulsed in rhythm with her frightened breathing, which told Jinho immediately that she belonged to the Velari. One of the most powerful and ancient species in the entire galaxy, the Velari, were known for their telepathic abilities and their bioluminescent bodies that could shift colors based on their emotions. And they were also known for being extremely protective of their young, with stories of Velari killing anyone who harmed or even frightened their children, spreading across every station and colony in compact space. Jinho's colleague Chomairi had once warned him that touching a Velari child without permission could result in death. And he remembered her words clearly as he stood there looking at this lost little girl who could not have been more than 6 or 7 years old by human standards. He should walk away and contact station security, letting them handle this situation with proper protocols and diplomatic channels. But the girl looked up at him with those silver eyes, and he saw something that made his heart ache. With recognition, she was terrified and alone, just as he had been many years ago when his mother died and left him with no one to hold him through the dark nights. Jinho lowered himself slowly to the ground and sat cross-legged about 3 meters away from the child, keeping his hands visible and his movements gentle. And he spoke in a soft voice that he hoped would not frighten her further. "Hello there, little one. My name is Jinho, and I am not going to hurt you." The girl flinched at his words and pressed herself harder against the wall, her skin flashing bright orange with fear before settling back to its anxious blue glow. And Jinho noticed that she wore a small device on her ear that was probably a translator. Though it seemed to be sparking and damaged, he reached into his pocket very slowly and pulled out a protein bar that he had been saving for a late snack, unwrapping it carefully and placing it on the ground between them before pushing it gently toward her with his fingertips. "Are you hungry? I bet you have not eaten in a while. This tastes pretty good for station food." The girl stared at the protein bar and then at Jinho, her expression uncertain and her glow shifting between orange and a slightly calmer purple. And he simply sat there without moving or speaking, letting her decide whether to trust him or not. Minutes passed in silence, and Jinho did not rush her or try to come closer, as he understood that trust could not be forced and that sometimes the kindest thing a person could do was simply wait other beings walk past the corridor entrance. And a few glanced at the scene with curiosity before hurrying away, as no one wanted to get involved with a Velari child and the potential consequences of interference. And Jinho watched them go with mild disappointment but no surprise. The galaxy was full of people who looked away from problems that were not their own. Finally, the little girl reached out with a trembling hand and took the protein bar, sniffing it cautiously before taking a tiny bite. And when she did not immediately die from human food poisoning, she took another bite, and then another until the bar was gone. "Good. You were hungry. Would you like some water too?" Jinho pulled out his canteen and set it down the same way he had with the food. And this time the girl did not hesitate as long before grabbing it and drinking deeply. And when she lowered the container, her skin had shifted to a softer shade of green that Jinho hoped meant she was feeling less afraid. "Can you tell me your name? Do you know where your family is?" The girl tapped her damaged translator and made a frustrated sound, then spoke in her own language, which came through the device as broken fragments that Jinho could barely understand. "Lost. Scared, mother. Far away, cannot find. Please help." Jinho felt his chest tighten with sympathy, and he extended his hand toward her, palm up, not grabbing or demanding but simply offering. and he spoke in the gentlest voice he could manage. "I will help you find your mother. I promise. Will you come with me?" The girl stared at his hand for a long moment, her silver eyes searching his face for any sign of danger or deception. And whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she slowly reached out and placed her small glowing fingers in his rough human palm. Her touch was warm and sent a strange tingling sensation up his arm, and he realized that she was probably sensing his emotions through that contact. Reading his intentions in a way no human could fake or hide, he stood up carefully, still holding her hand, and she rose with him. "Okay, little one. Let us go find someone who can help us locate your mother." They had barely taken 3 steps when the sound of running boots echoed through the corridor, and a squad of station security officers appeared with weapons drawn and expressions hard. And behind them came a tall Velari woman in diplomatic robes, whose eyes blazed with cold fury when she saw Jinho holding the child. "Step away from her immediately, human, or I will kill you where you stand." Jinho raised his free hand in surrender, but did not release the girl, who had suddenly pressed herself against his leg and wrapped her arms around him, with a fresh wave of terrified blue light pulsing across her skin. I found her lost and scared. I was just trying to help her. The Velari diplomat stepped forward with murder in her eyes. "That child is Tisani, daughter of High Matriarch Celine Tessara, and you will release her this instant, or face the consequences of threatening the heir to the most powerful house in the Velari Empire." Jinho looked down at the small girl clinging to him, at her frightened face and her desperate grip, and he made a decision that would change everything. "I do not think she wants me to let go."